You just said that.
What's that?
Or I can't believe you just said that.
Oh, or I can't believe it.
Oh,
Yeah.
please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. We'll call the Select Board meeting to order for November 9th. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome a new Select Board member, Malcolm.
Thank you.
Dr. McNabb, thank you. Congratulations.
It's a pleasure to be here.
There's no changes to the agenda. We're going to start off with short-term rental work group facilitator update. Our facilitator, Stacy Smith, is here to go over it. This will be more of an update, not we taking any questions from the public. Select Board members might have some comments or questions, but next week we will have an agenda item just for that. Yes, Erica.
I just wanted to point out to Malcolm that when you speak, you just need to make sure your mic is on, please.
Thank you. So, Stacy, take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm going to just share some slides. So I was asked to give just an overview of where we are so far with the short-term rentals work group. Just to start, I'm Stacy Smith. I'm managing director at the Consensus Building Institute and serving as the facilitator and chair of the work group. So I'm going to give just some updates on the work group to date. I have a couple of questions for you all, and then just give you a sense of what's coming next. So far we've had 3 meetings. The first one was 4 hours. The others were 3 roughly, bi-weekly. I didn't update this slide, but there has been full attendance of primary members at all 3 of the meetings. And we have focused on the following tasks. First, identifying and refining policy goals, identifying and responding to information needs, setting internal ground rules, and starting to clarify initial policy options. So policy goals. So we really started by trying to figure out what is it that we're trying to do here? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Realizing that different members of the working group have different ideas about what the problem is. So we spent some time brainstorming what success might look like for each of them. And then from there, I tried to pull them together into an initial draft statement of policy goals. And then we refined it together at our next meeting on the 25th. And the group agreed that this is iterative. So likely we'll get more detailed as we go along. But we wanted to just start somewhere. And this is where we started, which is to really have a broad sense of clear and enforceable policies that would regulate short-term rentals that help to meet the following goals. And so I'm not going to read them to you. I can give you a minute to read them. But these are a mix of the different things that matter to different people. So for some, some of these are more important than others. And just to say that the group does not necessarily agree that all of these things are related to short-term rentals or even the extent to which they are related to short-term rentals. But they all could agree that to the extent they might be related to short-term rentals, they would be good goals to meet. And in order to figure out how related are these things to short-term rentals, we turn to identifying information needs. So we started on October 11th, our first meeting, brainstorming what are the data questions that people have, what do they really want to know. We had a subgroup meeting to discuss those data questions in more detail with Granicus. And then Granicus presented a policy framework and some initial data, but really how it is they go about getting data and what kind of data they're able to get. They presented that at our second meeting on the 25th. And then We had another subgroup meeting at the end of that week on the 28th. This one to talk about the legal questions that people had. What is legal? What can we do? What can't we do? And then we had presentations from KP Law on the answers to those legal questions at our meeting yesterday. We also had a presentation at the request of members on zoning. What's Nantucket zoning now, and what can we do with zoning to address short-term rentals? So now Granicus is working with their team and with realtors in town to collect and synthesize short-term rental data and the implications of that data to the extent they can, in order to present that at our upcoming meeting in 2 weeks on November 22nd. So the third topic we dealt with were just internal operating protocols. You may have read some things in the press about that. I presented some draft protocols to the group on October 11th, and the group discussed them and approved the revised version on October 25th. And to be clear, these are voluntary agreement among the members, but not 8 out of the 9 members have agreed to follow all of the ground rules. There were 2 of the ground rules that one of the members, Act Now, has said that they are not willing to abide by, and those included following, not quoting other people and not speaking on behalf of the group as a whole to their constituents. They also would not commit to not submitting their own warrant article separate from the group. But all the other members agreed to follow those ground rules and to just carry on. Okay, and then the fourth topic that people started working on was starting to clarify what are the options that they might have for implementing changes to the bylaws, and whether zoning or general. And so Granicus's presentation last night started to identify the who, what, where, when, and how of short-term rental policy options, components that the group might draw from as a toolbox as they put together whatever it is that they agree that they want to move forward. And so that will really help the group as we explore, probably not much at the next meeting because we'll focus on data, but the meeting after that, starting to put together different packages of potential approaches, drawing from these options in order to meet the key policy goals that people have identified and want to do. We also discussed at the end of last meeting what might come next. And so this was the draft work plan that I presented to them, where our meeting on the 22nd would focus on reviewing the data that Granicus can put together. And then we would have a meeting, maybe a longer meeting, maybe mostly face-to-face with hybrid option for the public as well as for any members who aren't able to make it. And that meeting would focus on trying to put together these initial packages and starting to evaluate them. And then we talked about trying to put together a public meeting, possibly the following week, that would really give the public a chance to weigh in on some of the initial packages or ideas that the group was developing, where the public can then say more about what they like and don't like. And then coming back together with the working group to synthesize what we learned from the public, start to evaluate these options in more detail, and ideally try to select a preferred approach that could then be written up into draft bylaw language that the group could review on January 3rd and or continuing on the 10th in order to try and finalize something by the 17th. If that is our deadline to try and get a general bylaw draft article to the select board. This assumes that the group wants to move forward with a general bylaw. If the group decides that what they really want is a zoning bylaw, or they want a pairing of a general and a zoning bylaw, then likely this timeline will shift. It'll mean the group has more time to get their work done, and perhaps we don't have to try to run at such a breakneck speed. So with that, I think a couple of questions for you all from the group, particularly around deadlines. The first is really to get a sense of what is the final deadline, and for the group, if they wanted to try and get something on the warrant for 2023 for zoning, which I imagine is probably not viable, but anyway, just to know what that deadline would be, and also for general bylaw. And then there was some conversation about the potential for a special town meeting that might happen if the group needed more time, that there might be the potential for a special town meeting in the fall. And then I just had that as a placeholder for other questions that came up, but I don't think there were any from the meeting last night. Yeah, so this was, I think, I went through that already. So that's my update.
Thank you, Stacy. Libby, for one of those questions that was for the select board on the timeline, you pretty much know the date, and there was 1 week of wiggle room, maybe?
Yes, maybe. I did not have a chance to thoroughly get into that. It does tend to throw everything off, and the board likes to have some time to review comments once the finance committee has completed its motions. So this would shorten that time frame, if not eliminate it. So you'd be hearing the motions, say on, FinCom would adopt its motions on, say, a Monday or a Tuesday, and you'd be that Wednesday needing to do your comments in order to meet the printing deadlines and other deadlines. There's a couple of other things that I'm thinking about that might possibly provide some additional time, but I have not talked them over with the planning director yet or town council. So I need to get to that in the next few days. But I think for now we should plan on as is.
Stacey, do you have those dates, the as is dates?
I do. I have the PDF of dates that had January 18th, I think, as the final date. And I just thought it would really be helpful to have it spoken about here at this meeting, so all of the working group members could hear the same message at the same time about what those deadlines are.
Any comments on that? On timelines and deadlines, the board?
I mean, my only comment is I favor a thorough evaluation and vetting of different proposals and plenty of public outreach over rushing to get it to this town meeting.
So if we were to extend it, it would be rushing our comments and deliberations on the FinCom comments, which does take a couple of weeks. We have to really deliberate on what do we want to say for this article. Do we want to comment or not? I'd hate for that to be just 1 week.
Yeah, and I was also strongly a big proponent of lots of opportunity for public input into the process, not just into debating the merits of a specific warrant article. So this feels like one big public meeting where there's a lot of input versus multiples, which is sort of what I had envisioned when we got into this process. So
I don't disagree. Let's do it right.
Matt?
Want to say it again, Malcolm?
Sure, I'll say it again.
There you go. Now you'll be on the camera.
Hi, everyone. No, I mean, I'm a little disappointed in some ways it's taken so long, but I agree that it has to be done right. And we don't want to be running around at the last minute and make a mistake.
Yeah, my comment sort of is, hopefully, I'm glad to see Granicus is working with NARAB on data. And I think any suggestions that they have, hopefully the data will go back a little bit, and then hopefully it can be used in a predictive manner so we can look and say, if we do this, this is what will probably happen. If you do this, this is what will happen, so that we have some predictive value to it, because otherwise I think we're just sort of everyone's working at it from their own perspective, as opposed to this is likely to be what happens. And so I think that hopefully once that data is gathered and agreed upon, then hopefully that group can agree that these are the facts as we see them, and they can all be in agreement on that. They might not agree on how to move forward, but hopefully they can have facts, and whatever comes out can be attached to that data. That's sort of my hope on this. And if they can do it this quickly, I don't see anything else more important. If we have to push it a week, I think that's fine. If it comes to us fully vetted and thought through, and I think it will go more quickly. I mean, if it's thought through and it makes a lot of sense, and this group is all in favor of it and can explain why, and the data explains why, then that would be different than if there's a split in this group. If there's a split, it's going to go to town meeting and be, and if it's a zoning, it'll be a tough bar to pass again. So I hope that this group will find something that they can agree on.
Stacy, as an experienced facilitator, I'll put you on the spot. You've been with this group for what, 9-10 hours? That's a lot. What's your gut telling you? Do you think it's an option that we could get this done?
I honestly think we would be better off if we had more time. I think everybody is working in good faith, but I think the pressure and the fear of time getting away from us is not necessarily our friend. And if we could, I do think if we have more time to deliberate, I also, my big concern is because the deadline for zoning would be so soon, it basically takes off the table what could be a set of options that might be better. I mean, the group hasn't really gotten to look at which would be better, but I think it's more helpful to have all the options on the table. And there are some advantages, as we heard last night, that for what we could do with zoning versus what we could do with a general bylaw. And in fact, we also heard the advice that in any case, having language in the zoning bylaws that define short-term rentals and align with what's in the general bylaws is the ideal scenario. So yeah, I understand that there's a lot of pressure and concern, and people really want to move quickly. And, building consensus on a really tough issue takes time. And then the technical side itself takes time. So I guess I would say I'm willing to work ambitiously, quickly, if that's really what people think is needed. But I think that we'll probably all be better off if we had more time.
Thank you.
Maybe we should timeline out a potential date for a fall town meeting so that they have something to work from. If we're committed to calling a special town meeting for this issue, which it seems like there's support for, and I'm sure that we could find some other things to put on it.
Do we need to have a deadline to decide on the deadline? At what point do we decide, okay, we're not going to make it? Is that just kind of organic, or do we make the decision now?
I think it's really unrealistic, especially to pass a zoning bylaw. I think it's really rushed. And, every time we've been successful with something, we've spent a lot more time than this on it. And to be unsuccessful would be even more detrimental.
Yeah, and I think to preclude half of the toolbox because of a calendar issue, I've thought about putting a general bylaw, just the framework for a general bylaw without any details attached to it on the warrant this town meeting. And then in a special in the fall, it would be paired with, zoning bylaw would be paired with details around that general bylaw. But I don't know, I sort of feel like it's only fair that the community gets to see what all the options that have been considered and why this group has chosen one over the other, and not have it be because the closing deadline for a zoning bylaw just passed by too quickly. And that there's a lot of fear around and concern around this. And I think by rushing it, we're creating more pressure and more fear that can be alleviated with time and consensus building. And I think that's what, our professional facilitator is telling us. So I'm frankly ready to say, let's just give them some breathing room, and so they can pull back. And we're going to have registration starting in January too, which is going to add a whole other chunk of information that we won't have on this timeline as well. So,
Matt or Malcolm, anything else? Are you in favor of pushing? I'm just saying.
I'd let them come back to us. I'm guessing that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to take longer to get the data and they're going to have to get the NAREB data, and it has to be in the same form as the Granicus data to be able to throw out the ones that are, duplicates. And there's going to be some work to this. I don't think it's, a half hour, So.
Okay, so we're saying that if the work group comes back and says, we really need more time to do it, we're for that. We're okay with that, and
Well,
go back.
I'm disappointed it's taken so long, but I agree. And last month, I've heard a lot of comment on this subject, and it is a very emotional subject. And I agree, there are a lot of people afraid of what will come out of it. And unfortunately, we'll have to wait until it's done right.
Okay. Does that help, Stacy? At least
That's
knowing
very
where we.
helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
hey, Jason.
Yeah.
Just one other thought I had. I mean, I'm getting a lot of questions about the Article 39, the bylaw, the health bylaw, and how people aren't even understanding how that's going to impact the operations of short-term rentals. And I think that's adding another level of sort of suspense and concern about what is that going to look like. And we will have lived into that, both from the point of the data that I made before, but also just people's experience of living through the impact of a general bylaw and a regulation and its impact on short-term rentals, and sort of hopefully some relief that it's not as bad as some people think it's going to be.
It would give us more time, but let's say it's an October meeting, everything's got to be done by June, right? So it's not like we can go through the summer discussions. Just reminding us of like, it's, I don't know if it's 4 months or whatever it is, but it's still right around the corner.
And a lot doesn't happen in the summer. A lot
Right.
of that work, if people go on they're either too busy working or people go on vacation. There's a
Yeah.
slowdown. It's I've seen the pattern enough to know it's very difficult to get good work that time of the year.
So it could be done by then.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and I think if the recommendations are approved sort of late spring, then we have the whole summer while the seasonal community is here to do outreach on it in terms of explaining what we're proposing, why we're proposing it, what the impact will be on people while they're here.
Mhm.
too, which I think there's a huge advantage to that as well.
Stacey, I know you have a time limit. You probably have to go soon. Anything else?
No, I guess, well, one thing I just wanted to mention, and it's been my assumption that because you all convened this group, that you will support a consensus that comes out of the group. I think that's something that would be helpful to know. And I think more directly right now to know that the select board will not support motion articles that are coming from outside of this group while this group is in process. So I think that would be comforting for the group to have clear.
I think in concept, yes, that's correct. Or why would we put all this time and effort into this group? Doesn't mean that one individual member might support something else that comes out. But I think you can.
Well,
disagree.
Mr. Chairman, I can't support that concept. I don't know what I'm seeing yet. So I don't want to make a general statement that we'll approve whatever the working group comes out of unless I know what comes out of it.
Well, she was also saying not supporting any other citizen warrant articles to come out and waiting for.
I can't commit to that.
Right. That's why I said I think in concept we agree, but maybe not individuals.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And
Ron, did you
I'm
have-
sorry, I need to run
No,
to
go ahead.
another meeting.
Okay, go ahead, Stacey. We
Appreciate
can.
this. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Stacey. Don, you go ahead and make a comment.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I think we're committed to probably not sponsoring something else ourselves, but I can't commit to whether I'll support what comes out of the work group until I see it. I hope that with the way we established it, that's the goal, is for it to be something that's broadly supported. And if you don't have the support of this whole board, then maybe it might be an indication that it's not going to pass town meeting at that point too. So, something to think about.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if the citizens articles, if they're submitted and there's 2 or 3 citizens articles, we might not, we could say we don't support them, but they're still going to go to town, they're still going to go to town meeting, and we may want to comment on one or the other. And so there's things like that are out of our control. So I think it's hard to agree to something ahead of time, when everything's so fluid. I haven't heard a lot of people that are bringing anything. No one's saying they're bringing anything that I know of, but I think it's, there's always that possibility, and we need to be able to comment on it.
Yeah. So we want to support this, and we need to see it first.
Well, we want something that I want something that I can support.
Yeah.
I want something to come out that I say, okay, I can support
Yes.
this, and then I'll support it,
Yeah.
so.
And we'll know next week about citizen warrant articles, so.
Yeah.
Malcolm, do you have something else? Okay. All right. That was that. Announcements, Libby?
So this meeting is being video and audio recorded, and the sewer director, I believe, is online. He's going to give us an update on the sewer force main project. David?
Evening, everyone. Thank you. Project is moving along. I definitely can't say at breakneck paces, but we are moving along. This week, we have been concentrating on trying to get the force main across North Water Street onto South East Street, so that we can have all the work that needs to be done in Step Lane completed, so that we can pave it, get a temporary binder coat down and pave it for the winter, and be able to maybe possibly open that stretch of road back up again. The Robert B. Hour did take and make accommodations for the funeral this weekend, this Tuesday that went by, and that was successful. And South Shore Road is moving along as well at a good pace. So we're kind of on schedule so far.
Thank you, David. Thanks for making the adjusting for community events like something like a funeral. It's probably not easy to do, so thank you. Any questions for David? Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David. Veterans Day observance ceremony, the annual ceremony will be held this Friday, the 11th at 10:30 a.m. at the Federal Street War Memorial, right next door to the town building. Refreshments will follow at the Legion. Town offices will be closed this Friday in observance of Veterans Day. As noted earlier, the warrant for the 2023 annual town meeting, which is on Saturday, May 6th, is open for citizen warrant article submittals through November 14th, which is Monday at 4 p.m. And we have a variety of committee vacancies on the Zoning Board of Appeals, Harbor Plan Update Committee, Agricultural Commission, Tree Advisory Committee. The deadline for those is tomorrow at noon. And that's it.
Thank you, Libby. Any select board announcements or comments in the beginning? Brooke?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I was in a meeting and I looked out the window and somebody was pumping up their bike tires at the pump station that the Eagle Scout put in at the Rotary. And the person I was with who's there said she sees people there all the time using that. So I want to just say thank you. I don't remember the young man's name who came and presented that.
His name is Quinn, and I ran into him at the grocery store the other night, and he was awarded his Eagle Scout
Oh, that's
wow.
great
because of the
news.
project. So he was so proud.
Yeah,
So thank you.
it's so exciting to see something that our youth put together come to fruition in that way.
Any other comments? Okay. There's no follow-up comments from prior select board meetings. Is there any public comment tonight on items that are not on this agenda? Please step up or raise your digital hand. Okay, seeing none, there's no new business. Approval of minutes and treasury warrants. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve both?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
Oh, just to make a note, the Treasury warrant is actually November 9th, not November 2nd.
Okay. Did you get that, Erica? One of,
I was going to say.
yeah, he's on it.
I'm on now.
We're on it. Citizen Department Committee request. So Robert B. Hour, this is a request for waiver of town noise bylaw. This is November 14th to December 30th, so it's 4 p.m. to 2 a.m., Monday through Thursday nights. Dave, you here to talk on that?
Yes, sir, I am. Yes, thank you, everyone, again. This request is so that we can complete some of the last critical connections to the new pump station on Surfside Road. It won't be every night for that whole stretch of period. It's going to be some hit and miss dates. It's all going to be depending on how we can take and accommodate the flows to the station so we can limit those while they do their work. One of the connections will be done in the bike path directly in front of the station. They already have an existing temporary sidewalk bike path in the area that they put in last year. And then the other big work is going to be taking place in the Mike Comet and Surfside intersection. That's going to be one of the ones that is going to be very dependent on the flows hitting the. So this is very similar to what we've done the last year or so with the noise waivers for Robert B. Hour. And we're just seeking your support so we can move forward.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments? Erica?
I'll just note that when we discussed this in our last sewer meeting, we did discuss public outreach, especially in that Mycomet Ave, Surfside Road area, and we're going to be very diligent about reaching out to those immediate neighbors there.
Okay. And it's not just noise, it's lights too, right? It's the really big floodlights.
Yes.
Yeah, this question really isn't related to the noise, but is the plan still temporary capping of the work area on Fridays for the weekend? Or I think that's what they did last time, right?
Yeah, this isn't going to be a long-term construction area in the roadways at this point in time. These are just to make some critical connections to the new station. Further on down the line, once we come through with the force main, we'll be seeking some other night work so we can do some other connections up towards the school and up toward Vesper Lane. So this is one step of a couple of phases coming.
And
Thanks.
Brooke, to clarify, it's more like spot area, not a whole stretch, so.
Right. And the other alternative is to do it during the day and have major disruption versus minor disruption.
Yeah, and we, early on in this project, we had a lot of discussion with the school, and it was agreed then that we would do our best to minimize any impact to the school.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, David.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee Quarterly Report. We have Mr. Vincent.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Delighted to see you here. Too loud or too quiet?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to give the quarterly report for the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee for July, August, and September. We had a couple of pretty interesting meetings. The one on August 9th was probably one of my favorites of the year so far, because we brought together a whole bunch of people who were particularly involved in the downtown area. We had the Harbour Master, Sheila Lucy. We had Emily Kilvert from the Nantucket Yacht Club. She's the chair of their Rising Sea Level Committee. Stephen Crease, who's the general manager at the Great Harbour Yacht Club, and Carolina Margina, who is the sustainability manager for New England Developments, the owners of the boat basin, essentially. And they all had a wonderful conversation with Crack. We got to understand a lot of what those groups are planning, and then how we can help them include the CRP in their works and be on par and work with the town as they progress with their joint works as well. One of the other big things that came along was in September. This was at the Select Board, and thank you all at the Select Board for, again, making September Climate Change Awareness Month. So for Coastal Resilience Plan activities, one of the big ones that the committee did a bit of work on was the update of the local sea level rise scenarios, and one of the things I want to do is include best available flood hazard data. I've spoken a bit about the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model. One of the concerns the committee had was that that's not publicly available, and I have worked with the Planning and Land Use Services Department as well as IT to try and get that on the town website. There was a financial cost to it. We have worked that out. That is pretty simple. It wasn't a big dollar number, and we're in process of getting this on the town website, contract generated and everything. Pretty straightforward. So it's just a question of how fast we can get that through now, and then we can bring this back to the committee, and the committee can update its sea level rise recommendations for the Select Board. The committee also worked on the Just Do It list, which came from the March Design Thinking Workshop, and tried to understand the other priority one projects within the CRP, and tried to figure out, well, what should we move forward with? What can we try and get done from the CRP that is also on the Just Do It list? And one of the key things was the general consensus was that the committee should work forward with the Nantucket Erosion Management and Pilot Project for Ames Avenue Bridge Protections. And that should probably be one of the priorities as we move forward over the next year. Other business that the committee undertook on August 11th, I think it was, the Conservation Commission generated a letter that they sent to Mass DEP. They've been working on, the committee worked on supporting that letter, and that's something that's going to come before this committee at some point in the near future, I should think. Sorry, before the Select Board in the near future. Rachel Freeman, who is now on the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee representing the Land Bank, outlined all of the Land Bank plans on August 23rd to give us an idea of what they're thinking and how the Land Bank and the town through the CRP can work together and start integrating plans together. That was quite a nice one. We have been using a different town's strategy. They have this wonderful tiered strategy. It's a decision-making tree in Falmouth. We reviewed that and how that works because they just got approved. And we're trying to learn from that. So the committee was doing another part of its job, reviewing other towns and what they do to try and integrate it into the Nantucket system. Quick mention on grant applications. We had done a grant application in June, and I'm sorry to say on the 16th of September, we got notice that we didn't get the CZM grant application. We also went off and spoke to CZM myself, Mary Longacre, the chair of the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee, and Trevor Johnson from Arcadis to try and get some feedback, and it was a really close run thing. Couple of very minor technical things let us down, and they said, please reapply. They were very, very encouraging. It was sad to see that it was such a close run thing, but it was just a minor point to lose on. They had an issue with a couple of things not having the correct weighting. When you say a project should have so much public input as well as so much design, they thought they were too even, and we can resolve that pretty simply.
So Vince, on that, they got us on technicalities, and so they gave it to somebody else, or they have that funding and they just didn't give it to us because they didn't like XYZ.
Something like 78 different municipalities are available to receive this money. They only had a set pot. They had to choose the absolute best of the best. We were amongst that, and we lost just on a couple of minor points. It's a points-based system, and we lost we were deducted a few points basically for one or two very minor things. But we were certainly in the running. That was one of the messages they gave us, and that was quite clear. So a bit sad on that one, but on a positive note,
two numbers were kind of the same, so they thought they must have been estimates. It's that's the short version.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. We do have some positive news. The Natural Resources Department got a grant for resilience work in Sacajah Pond, and this then supports a different CRP recommendation for the whole recommendation is for Pulpus Road, culvert expansion and wave attenuation at Sacajah Pond, and it's the Sacajah Pond part of that we have a grant for now, and it's about just a touch over $150,000. So that's a pretty nice thing to talk about. CRAC has 2 standing recommendations and requests. They've been in the last ones as well. They'll probably continue. They're looking for anything that are upcoming issues that the Select Board would like CRAC's advice on, and CRAC also requests that the Select Board expand the environmental goals of the strategic plan to include a recommendation on the 40 recommendations of the CRP in the next 10 years as a specific goal. Probably a sentence in the strategic plan or a couple of paragraphs in the strategic plan could accomplish that. Any questions on that, or does anyone else want to make a comment on it, such as Mary Longacre, who I think might be online?
Mary, do you have anything to add?
Well, just thank you, Vince, for that summary. And I'm going to do a little bit of a spoiler alert for our 4th quarter report. We reviewed the Coastal Resilience Plan, and of the 40 recommendations, 2 are completed, 19 are underway, and 19 are not yet started. So if you forgive the pun, we're off to a cracking start on that. And to follow up on the request that the Select Board includes the Coastal Resilience Plan in the strategic plan in the environmental goals section, I'll just note that there are 2 environmental goals at the moment, one for water quality and one for solid waste management. So it would simply be a matter of adding a 3rd goal, which would be to implement the recommendations of the Coastal Resilience Plan. I think that's all we're really looking for, although certainly you could elaborate on that in more detail in the plan if you wanted to.
Thank you, Mary. And that pun was accepted. Please bring us more. Anything else? Any questions? Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Mary. And thank you for everybody on that committee. You guys are doing great.
Yeah, what I will say is I think that the committee is tracking things and trying to stay on track and trying to move things forward as best possible, which is, very helpful to know here's the plan, these are the things we should be doing, and where are we, where do we stand, which has been a positive.
How long has that committee been going? 2 years?
Not long.
3? 3. Think about what's happened in 3 years. It's pretty impressive. It really is. Okay, next up, request for consent and finding of no conflict for Halkeen's request to allow Klein Hornig's Washington office to advise them regarding a HUD compliance issue. Tucker's here to walk us through this.
Good evening. This is, as just was outlined, a request from Halkeen regarding the ability of Klein Hornig, who is representing the town in the Six Fairgrounds Tacoma Green project, to be able, out of their Washington office, serve a issue that Halkeen is dealing with. And I will just read from a note from our attorney, Joe Lieber. He says that Halkeen has reached out to one of my colleagues in our Washington, D.C. office to assist them with HUD compliance issues at 2 of their operating properties, obviously not Tacoma Green, which doesn't exist yet. Before my firm can accept HK as a client, we would need your consent and agreement to waive the potential conflicts of interest posed by that representation. I want to assure you that neither Becca nor I will have any role in the proposed representation of HK. Our colleague who would take on that work won't have any role in the Tacoma Green project, and that representation won't have anything to do with HK's proposed Nantucket project. We will all honor the tenets of client confidentiality and zealous representation. Obviously, Town Council has had a chance to consider this and doesn't see a conflict, and therefore we're asking for you to approve this waiver.
Questions?
I was just going to make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Any comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That passes.
Thank you.
Yeah, when town council looked at it and said no conflict, I felt comfortable because usually if they even smell any conflict of interest, they say don't do it. Even the appearance of it. So that was good. Thank you, Tucker. Okay, town manager's report.
Vince didn't leave, did he?
He got out just in time.
Is his stuff back there?
No, his stuff's still
there. He knows this is coming up, so I think he'll be right back in. Do you want to quickly take up the meeting schedule?
Sure, we'll do that. We'll do number 2, review of proposed 2023 select board meeting schedule. Everybody have a chance to look at it? Have any?
I don't think there's anything particularly different.
Right. The only thing we ever discuss is usually the summers, like how many meetings we want to take off or not take off.
Yeah, and we kept it about the same as this past summer.
Okay.
Yeah, I followed pretty much the same format
Okay.
this last year or two.
All right. Do you need a motion or are we're
I
good?
think general agreement
All right.
is fine. Thank you.
Sorry, everybody's heads nod. All right, that was perfect timing.
Vince, you're up.
So next is a request for select board approval of notice of intent to Conservation Commission in connection with the Sconza Beach erosion control project.
That didn't take long. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I prepared some notes for myself this time so that we can go over this in a bit of detail. I want to introduce the project and give some background on how it's gone over the last while and what to expect in this project and the value that is in this project. So this is an extremely valuable plan that has taken an enormous amount of time and work to develop. There were several rounds of work earlier in the year and a large push since August to develop the NOI. Town and SBPF tried developing this earlier this year and developed the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, to increase our ability to work together within defined parameters. This is a nearly finished draft. SBPF has collected up all the necessary permissions from the neighbouring property owners involving nearly all the property owners involved, and all that will be in the final document when it's submitted to the Concom on or before November 17th filing deadline. One of the crucial pieces of permission to attain is the permission of the Select Board as the property owner of the town's properties that are to be part of this NOI. This is one of the main reasons we're here tonight, is to present the project to the board and seek permission first and foremost. There were some outstanding issues in the process that are yet to be dealt with. The March MOU outlined a bond for the cost of removal. Since the first geotubes were built about 9 years ago, the bond has been in place. Now all sides agree that the previous amount was insufficient and SBPF has committed to putting a bond in place to cover potential removal costs, and we are working to finalise that before the NOI is submitted to the Conservation Commission. That's important to know. It's in work, in process. Another issue is that the Operation and Maintenance Manual. This is how the town will oversee and control implementation and all aspects of the work. This was developed in the early part of the year and completed around February. We are now waiting on the CONCOM to approve this, and we have submitted to the Conservation Commission for approval. Since it has been developed, the town and SBPF have honoured and been enforcing this manual. We still need the CONCOM to approve it and make it official and solidify the O&M manual, the Operation and Maintenance Manual. The NOI promises a lot. We need the O&M manual to make sure that all of these actions are lived up to. This O&M Operation and Maintenance Manual will solidify the NOI and give greater strength to the town in this partnership. SBPF has become a more reasonable and responsible property owner, partner, and I mean that thoroughly. They have worked hard on this. This is no longer just about homeowners, and with the town embedded in the development of the NOI, this has become a much larger public benefit. Much greater consideration was given to the roads, historic sites, and public benefit than was previously, even though it was always included. This is now a more beneficial civic project and works well through public-private partnership at the community level. This can be an example for other neighbourhoods around the island to follow. Think about people in Nantucket and South Shore, other parts of, say, downtown area. This is going to be very useful as a guide. One of the main key changes affected by the town in this process was that there was that the road was in this process was that there were road utilities and the nearest to the bank edge on the north end of Baxter Road. This is where the geotubes will go first. We're doing the north first as a priority, as this is where the area of the greatest need is. I commend SBPF team for recognizing this need to be done first, protecting the area before before protecting the area to the south where the majority of the homes are. This is a more civic-minded approach and shows their commitment to the whole area. The town worked hard for this inclusion and recognition, and as did SBPF. We will make road relocation, the road relocation project, the alternative access project, much easier and much more palatable a project to complete, as it is still necessary for the long-term planning, and will help the property owners in that area develop the more shovel-ready plan, as it is as they see the possibility of the road relocation diminishing. There are several other things that we worked hard on together. We worked hard on greatly improved beach access and facilities for locations for benches and bike racks and other amenities. But one of the biggest things was the inclusion of in the amenities was the possibility for up to 2 beach stairs that will be built at SBPF's expense and then turned over to the town. We still need to study where these will go and how they will be constructed. This will be a game changer, and this is something that people should really pay attention to. In terms of public access to the beach below the bluff and how the public will be put closer to the coastal engineering structure and see how it works. With better public access also comes better understanding of the ability for greater public oversight and to take the see something, say something approach if some problems do occur. We have monitoring inbuilt into the project, but this type of public monitoring will increase compliance. As there will be increased access to the beach, we are also proposing that the town undertake water quality monitoring in this area, similar to what they do in other bathing water areas during the summer season. This will increase recreational confidence in the area. Nature-based solutions were identified in the CRP as a major public benefit and want and a goal. REACH 5 will be a monitoring program before it becomes a dune nourishment program. This could also provide learning opportunities for both the town and SBPF. The CRP has a focus on dunes in some areas, and now this NOI does too. Dune management will be an important thing for both sides to learn, particularly as the town is getting into this. There's other things to consider too if this venture is unsuccessful. We still have the alternative access project, and it is a necessary project that is in development and was presented at this committee to this board on October 19th. Both the NOI and alternative access were in the Baxter Road long-term planning document that was finalized about this time last year, and we're acting on both as and the key recommendations. Expansion of the two of the tow protection and the alternative access were adaptation pathways that were identified and indicated as to be protective in the area. They were considered effective and feasible by almost all sites. This is where some agreement occurred across all groups in the work we did in that project. Timing and the solution preferences were not entirely agreed, but were generally agreeable solutions. Now both are happening. Part of resilience is being redundant and having a backup plan. And that is what we are doing now with this work in this quality NOI and planning for alternative access. If it's okay now with you, Jason, I would like to turn this over to Dwight Dunk from Epsilon. He is going to talk about the NOI with a focus on its technical parts, technical aspects. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Select Board. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, before we get started, just identify some key members of the team that have been working on the notice of intent, work with Vince and others. Obviously, Vince Murphy, Coastal Resilience Coordinator. From Arcadis, Miss Catherine Edwards, Kate Edwards, professional engineer with Arcadis. From SBPF, Meredith and Josh. And from Epsilon Associates, myself and Nicole Perlott. And we've been working together tirelessly, trying to pull together a quality notice of intent. As Vince mentioned, this notice of intent really is the result of efforts from many people, stakeholders, the town, and others to develop the revised stabilization project to address the issues raised by stakeholders and staff, and at the same time, a project that is technically sound, meets the regulations, both the State Wetlands Protection Act regulations and the Nantucket bylaw, and that's financially feasible. Those efforts have included the working group back in 2020, the Arcadis Baxter Road long-term planning summary of findings back in 2021, the Nantucket Coastal Resilience Plan from this year, and this year's memorandum of understanding between the town and SBPF. And through these efforts, the project presented in this 2022 notice of intent includes many of those items, many of those elements, which are to evaluate the shoreline by reach. The working group identified, kind of it's a long shoreline for protection, and maybe a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. So so we examined the shoreline, identified 5 reaches, which we'll go into a little bit later, so that we can propose stabilization efforts and manage the compensatory sand volumes by reach. Also to implement the project in phases. It's a large project, so that really does make sense. Along with the phases, we've identified phase 1 and phase 2. Future phases would allow transition of tow protection measures based on the coastal bluff slope conditions. This proposal includes 3 tow protection measures, and those have been determined by reach and phase. And those include geotubes, coir terraces, and dune nourishment. We've proposed an adaptive compensatory sand management program in this notice of intent. The previous notice of intent in the current pilot project or existing geotubes, I may use those terms interchangeably, did include revegetating the exposed bluff soils above tow protection measures as needed. and as Vince mentioned, improving recreational uses and accessibility. Regarding the recreational uses, the applicants, offer to make best efforts to improve the use along Baxter Road down to the beach, in the visual aesthetic uses too, by installing public seating in the viewing area. The applicants, SBPF, will continue to clean the beach of debris and trash. There are regular inspections of the template, and when that is done, that staff does clean up debris that they encounter and remove that and dispose of it properly. That will continue. We'll work collaboratively to install pet waste stations in the project area, identify a beach access number for safety purposes. As Vince was mentioning, we'll take some engineering evaluations and feasibility for safe and reasonably practical public stair access or ramp down the coastal bank to the template in 1 or 2 locations, as well as the seasonal summer season stairs from the template down to the beach. And with that improved public access, include this as part of the public water quality monitoring program that the town does at swimming beaches. For all projects, you want to understand the purpose and need. And here, the purpose and need, I think, is pretty straightforward. The shoreline has been eroding, the bluff has been eroding, the dune along the eastern Nantucket coast has been eroding from north to south. And the dunes really form a good function of protecting the coastal bluff. We can call it Sconset Bluff, Coastal Bluff, and it's regulated as a coastal bank in the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw. So again, I may use those terms interchangeably. But the dunes protect the toe of the bluff from wave action and protects it from erosion. As that dune is lost, now the waves can interact with the toe of the coastal bluff and cause erosion. And we often refer to erosion on an annual rate, but erosion of the coastal bluff really is not an annual basis. What happens is the bluff gets eroded at the toe, it starts to get over steepened, and then there'll be an episodic event, large erosion event, where you lose many feet of the bluff. And that's what happened in the winter of 2012 and 2013, where there was up to 40 feet of the top of the bluff retreated landward. So it's, one way to think of it is, there's a little nibbling away all the time at the toe of the bluff. It gets over steepened, and then that just can't hold anymore and it gives way. So we do present this as an annual rate that's shown here on the slide, and we provided some cross sections so you can see the 1994, if you can see my cursor, location of the bluff, and then from the June 2022 survey. Here, this top one is at 115 Baxter Road. The middle one is at 85 Baxter Road, where you can see there's been quite a bit of erosion. And actually, it's more proper to call it bluff or bank retreat rather than erosion. So we're seeing the bank retreat. Also, what we've called Breach 4, which is 61 to 71 Baxter Road. That area is protected by Coir terraces presently. They've been installed for about 15 or so years. And Coir terraces are marginally effective in this type of a high energy environment, but they can be overtopped. And when they're overtopped, then you get that toe erosion and you start to get the bank failure and erosion on the bank. And so these are just a couple of photos from 67 and 65 Baxter. You can see that, where the Coir terraces are in place. You have the top of bank scarp, and at 67, there's some mid-slope that's subject to erosion. It's denuded from vegetation. Over 65, there's the scarp. Then there's a slope failure. Basically, you got a block failure of the vegetation. There's still vegetation there, but once you lose the vegetation, you really start to see an accelerated retreat rate. And then the purpose, obviously, is to protect the road, the public utilities within the road, and the private homes, along the bluff. The alternatives that are presented in the notice of intent really are those alternatives that have been tested and studied, both in theory and in practice. Epsilon has been working with the SBPF for about 20 or so years on various efforts to try to stabilize the Sconset Bluff. One of the items which everyone has talked about is managed retreat, and basically 27 of the homes along the east side of Baxter Road have been relocated either off the property completely or as far landward on the property as possible. So managed retreat has been practiced basically to the extent practicable to date. SBPF did try beach dewatering. That's a practice of trying to lower the groundwater elevation to stabilize the beach, which would then help to stabilize the bluff. That yielded inconsistent results after about 9 years of operation and monitoring. The Coya reinforced coastal terraces, those have been installed, and they are effective for less intense storm events, but they do get overtopped with larger, higher intensity storm events. Drainage wells were installed, and those two did not yield beneficial results. The big beach project, or the beach nourishment, the large scale beach nourishment, that went through the MEPA EIR review process. That proposal ended up being denied. There was also a study of a large scale sacrificial dune. It's similar to the beach nourishment, but a somewhat different design. That was looked into. The results, the impacts were considered to be similar to the large scale beach nourishment, and which was denied. So that project wasn't carried forth further in the study. Marine mattresses and gabions were proposed and denied. The revetment project, that notice of intent was withdrawn after there's a settlement to install the present geotube project. And those geotubes obviously were allowed and are installed and been monitored and maintained. A living shoreline was identified by the working group. A traditional living shoreline is a vegetated coastal bank, salt marsh, other type of integration of biotic and abiotic materials to try to mimic a natural environment. And in terms of the large scale project, that wasn't considered feasible for this full length of the shoreline. And then the Arcadis feasibility study really was an alternatives analysis. They identified the short-term actions to maintain and monitor the existing pilot project, and midterm actions to install interim bluff stabilization measures. And we think that what's proposed in this notice of intent is a interim bluff stabilization measure. I've mentioned reaches. I have this slide, and then I'll be able to zoom into the graphic, because this graphic I know is hard for you all to read. But we examined the shoreline to look at the slopes, the conditions, whether it's exposed soils, vegetated, and also to look at the erosion rates, the retreat rates. And from that, we assigned the shoreline into 5 reaches or segments. We've also then identified phasing for the project. Phase 1 involves maintaining the existing pilot project, It's extending the geotube system to the north and south for reaches 1, 2, and 3, and then installing coir terraces in reach 4. Phase 2 would be triggered by the availability of sustainable sand source. And during phase 2, the coir terraces in reach 4 would be replaced with the geotube, and then reach 5 would include a dune nourishment. So you can see here, hopefully a little bit better, these colors up here in the legend, these colors aren't showing where the work occurring. It's really just illustrative to show the extent of the different types of treatments. So basically having geotubes, the extension or the returns for the geotube at the north would extend across 119, with the geotube itself ending at 117, the returns extending across 119, and that would tie into the north end of the existing pilot project. From the south end of the existing pilot project, it would continue down the rest of reach 2, reach 3, and just the first lot within reach 4 with geotubes, and then there would be the coir terraces in reach 4 during phase 1. Those would get changed out in phase 2 to geotubes, and phase 2 would have the dune nourishment in reach 5. So that's the proposed project. Here are just some of the images of the design drawings that are in the notice of intent. Gives a little better understanding. The red is the existing geotube project. The sand template itself does extend more seaward than the red, which is the geotubes themselves. So this is showing reaches 1, 2, and 3. And then for phase 1, we have reach 4 with the coir terrace that would then be replaced, and the dune nourishment here. These are just a couple of the details from the design drawings, so that you can see more details in the package itself. But I just wanted you all to see what in cross section. The design includes 4 tiers of 45-foot diameter geotextile tubes that are filled with sand. Although they're cylindrical, when they get built and filled, they are more, like an oblong in cross section. They would be installed with the lowest tier at -3, elevation -3, so that it's below the beach, to try to avoid scour during intense storm events, so that the geotubes do not get undermined. And then they extend up. The 100-year flood elevation is about 7.7 feet, but the wave run up, and accounting for some sea level rise, we bring the top of the geotubes up to elevation 25 feet. The wave run up model shows that during intense storms, the waves do run up quite high, and we want to avoid the overtopping. And this is just showing what you would see kind of a cross section when you're out there, with it basically being all covered by sand. The coir terraces likewise are buried and extend up above the grade, and then would have a sand terrace, sand template over them. And this is the dune nourishment. The dune nourishment itself, the drawings pick a location for the cross section. We know that the dune is a little more undulating as you go along the length of reach 5. So the top of the dune would actually be determined in the field. We don't want to cover existing dune grass. So the template, the top of that sand nourishment would not be so high as to cover existing dune grass. But that's the design intent here for the dune nourishment. One of the issues then is the sand management, the sand template. The question is, why do you have a template, and how much sand should there be? Now, the why is because the geotubes, which is a coastal engineering structure as defined by the Mass DEP, the The purpose of that is to stabilize the toe to prevent bluff erosion. The bluff is a sediment source to the littoral drift system, but the bluff is a glacial landform, and that sediment transport is a one-way system. So it's one way from the bluff to the beach, out into the near shore and into the littoral drift system. And since it's a sediment source, and the purpose of the geotube is to prevent erosion, the bluff no longer, that one-way sand transport system is interrupted. So what we want to do is manage it by putting sand on top of the CES so that the sand can continue to be delivered, and into the littoral drift system, contributed to the littoral drift system. So we want to try to, not interrupt that by placement of the CES as it does its job. The other question then is how much sand? And Mass DEP and CZM in determining compensatory sand volumes for CES is basically it's a your high school geometry, length times height times width, but instead of width this time it's retreat rate. So it's the length of the project, the height of the bluff, and then the retreat rate. And we calculated the retreat rate using LiDAR surveys from publicly available LiDAR in 1994 and the site-specific LiDAR survey from June of this year. And with that, we then established transects every 10 feet, established that volume that was lost over that 28-year period, looked at the length times the height times the retreat rate, and then by the 28 years to establish an annual rate. And so this table here, really the takeaway message of this table is we looked at it by reach. This is the total amount of sediment that was lost off the coastal bluff by reach over the 28 years. We have an annual contribution rate. And the current project has a requirement of 22 cubic yards of sand per linear foot. And so we've identified to design the template for the proposed project to be 22 cubic yards per linear foot. And then instead of delivering that to the template every year, the intent is to have an adaptive sand management program. It gets filled when it's built to 22. After the winter storm season, so in the spring, we conduct a topographic survey of the template, determine what the elevations are on the template. From that, we can determine how much sand is on there. Subtract that from 22, we understand how much sand was contributed to the littoral drift system, and then we refill the tank, so to speak, refill the template every fall. But with that 22 cubic yards per linear foot of sand on the template, when we look at how much sand is actually, or sediment is actually contributed from the natural bluff presently with no protection by reach, we see that we have nearly 2 years worth of sand. The 22 cubic yards per linear foot equates to nearly 2 years of sand for the current pilot project. And down at reach 4, when that gets converted in phase 2, when that would get converted to geotubes, that 22 cubic yards becomes nearly 16 years. So the takeaway is this template has a lot of storage capacity for a lot of sand to provide between 2 and 15 years of sand as an on-site stockpile. And that's the thing, that the template is designed to be the on-site stockpile of sand so that after a storm event, the tubes are exposed because of wave action. The bulldozer comes along and pushes sand off the top of the template and recovers that, so that there's plenty of sand on here with the 22, and the adaptive management refills the tank. And we've just provided to understand the total project that we're talking about at the end of phase 2 for geotubes is about 40 linear feet. As Vince mentioned, there is monitoring proposed, is currently monitoring with the pilot project, and we proposed some modifications from the current pilot project monitoring for the proposed project. And the monitoring is based on the DEP beach nourishment guidelines. The DEP guidelines identify conducting 1 year of quarterly surveys post-construction, and then 1 annual survey for 2 to 3 years after construction. So what we've proposed is more rigorous than the DEP guidance here. And so, we would continue with the shoreline quarterly surveys for 1 year post-construction. That's the present 46 profiles along the entire eastern coast of Nantucket. And then after 1 year of construction, after post-construction, we would conduct the shoreline monitoring in spring and fall. That's the 46 transects, as well as bathymetric surveys semi-annually, spring and fall, so we can tie the beach and the bluff and the template surveys into the bathymetry. Then in the summer and winter, we'd conduct template transect surveys. So we do those semi-annually going forward. And those would be along the template at the end, at the northerly and southerly ends of the template, beyond the limits of the template. So for the unprotected bluff to the north and to the dune to the south at the end of phase 2, and one in the midpoint. And the purpose there is to look to see, is the project having any effects on the nearby beach in front of the project. We'd continue to do both post-storm inspections, as has been done for the past 8 or 9 years. And then we do the spring survey would be also include a template topographic survey, because that's what's used to determine the volume of sand after the winter, to know how much sand to refill on the template. In terms of the compliance piece, obviously this is regulated by the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, the WPA, and the Nantucket Wetlands Bylaw. So it was designed to protect the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act and the values identified in the bylaw. Values and interests are both the same things. The two laws just use those two different terms. And, from the project, that's the pilot project that's in place, as we look to that as guidance for the proposed project, the local orders of conditions have been appealed. They've gone to DEP for superseding orders of conditions, SOC. And the DEP has issued superseding orders of conditions, both for the current pilot project, which is the 2824, and the 2018 project, which was file number 3115. The issuance of those superseding orders by DEP identifies that the geotube coastal engineering structure protects the interest of the act, which is primarily storm damage prevention, and that the key project elements comply with the state regulations. And those elements that are, go to the compliance is that the compensatory sand volume equation is, properly used and to determine the compensatory sand volume, that the homes present on the east side of Baxter Road are pre-78 buildings. The regulations for Coastal Bank, the coastal wetland regulations, went into effect in 1979. The law was passed in 1978. So when those were passed, they basically said all the structures that are on a coastal bank are kind of grandfathered and can be protected by coastal engineering structures. So that's why we call them a pre-78 building. The monitoring data confirmed that the pilot project has had no adverse effect. That's why DEP could issue the SOC for the 2018 project. They did allow a transition to an adaptive sand management plan because the order of conditions issued by the town had the static 22 cubic yards per linear foot. DEP said, yep, you can do that, SBPF, but you can transition in the future to an adaptive sand management. And they also allowed for a transition to a revised monitoring plan after several years. We believe that a revised monitoring plan is acceptable and also it certainly meets their beach nourishment project guidance. And so, that's the guidance that they use for making those decisions. With that conclusion, we just wanted to note that the project, just trying to do kind of a Reader's Digest of the notice of intent, that the project is needed. Sconset Bluff is experiencing erosion. It's the coastal bank is retreating, and in order to protect the road, the public infrastructure, the utilities, the homes, the stabilization project is needed. It meets all the performance standards. The pilot project is just that. It's a pilot project that's kind of a proof of concept. Back when that was authorized, the commission had to make the decision on science and engineering design and evaluations. For this project, the decision can be made based on the science and the engineering, but also there's a pilot project that's about 950 feet long that has shown its effectiveness at preventing the bluff from retreating along that segment of the shoreline. The compensatory sand program contributes sand to the system that's commensurate with, or actually slightly greater than, the pre-construction bluff contribution for that 950 feet. The annual reports show that, so that is doing the same job, providing the same sand amount that the bluff was contributing pre-construction, and that the adaptive sand management will likewise provide many years of sand in the template and make sure that it's refilled every year. And we know, the select board knows a lot about this project. The work along Sconset Bluff, as I said, there's been a couple of decades of work trying to stabilize this bluff using different means and measures to do that. And we often get many of the same questions over and over. So we just wanted to kind of review those key questions. Is the project area eligible for a CES? Yes, the notice of intent documents that all the homes are pre-78 homes. 41 may not, but that's at the far end of Reach 5, and that's where due nourishment is provided. The geotubes and other measures the right blend of tow protection measures? And we think, yes, the alternatives analysis plus 8 years of data shows that the geotubes are effective at stabilizing the bluff. We also have coir terraces in phase 1 until a sustainable sand source is established. Then those can transition to geotubes. And then below that, we have the nature-based solutions. So it's, we are using different techniques based on availability of sand, based on the bluff conditions. Is the future monitoring, maintenance, and reporting strong and fair? Again, we think it is. It's built on the beach nourishment guidance. In fact, it's more rigorous than what DEP identifies in their guidance, and it also uses the pilot project as a baseline. And does it protect the Wetland Protection Act interest and bylaw value of storm damage prevention? Yes, it does. But it also, with the elements that are added to this project of the public access in those elements for recreation, the bylaw includes a value of recreation. So it actually improves the recreation value that's established in the bylaw. With that, we just request that that the select board would vote to sign the notice of intent as co-owner and co-applicant. This is not a decision approving or denying the project, just to allow it to go forward, to be submitted, and then be reviewed by the Conservation Commission. And with that, the team is here and available to answer questions or, address comments as needed.
Thank you, Dr. Dunk. Before we go to the select board members, and then after that, once we have some discussions, questions, we'll go to the public, and then maybe we go back and forth. I wanted to see if Kate from Arcadis had anything to add.
Hi, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say the team worked really hard collaboratively on this, and we also lend our support here for the document being considered.
Thank you, Kate. Select board, any comments or questions? There was a little bit of information there. Malcolm?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank you for putting this on my first meeting's agenda.
We timed it perfectly.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I have a lot of concerns about the project. Nature almost always wins, and this is an awful lot of effort, and in the end, to fail. I have a lot of questions about: is there enough sand? How is the sand calculated? Who's monitoring? Who's monitoring the monitors? I guess that's not really the question tonight. I haven't heard any of this information or data challenged by anyone in any kind of rational way. Unfortunately, like many things in this island, this project has become quite emotional, and it's very hard for people to talk to each other. So if the issue is submitting this, submit it and let the Concom have their comments. But I'm just telling you up front, I have a lot of questions about whether this would ever work. Do we have enough sand in the world to actually nourish it appropriately? The monitoring, who's going to monitor the monitors, et cetera, et cetera. But I will let the Concom answer a lot of these questions for me. But I certainly, I have to say, I'm skeptical. But I'm always open to challenge, and I'm always open to being told that I am wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll comment on a couple things. I agree. It's difficult, and there's a lot here. Some of the things that are in the MOU or in the prior agreement or in this agreement are improvements. Some of them are improvements that the Concom had issues with, like that were outside their purview. Like, is there enough sand? Where are you going to get the sand from? And I think, I think that is a concern. And one of the things that we've said, they're proceeding for part of it, but the future isn't until they identify a sand source. And I think that's one thing I have learned sort of on the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee is that there are, one thing we're gonna need no matter what is tons of sand. And we need to find a place to get it. And, so hopefully this will end up being a step that direction before it expands to stage 2. Another one that's been improved is in the previous agreements, we talked about it had to maintain a walkable beach, but it wasn't really, what's a walkable beach? What someone might say is walkable, someone else might say isn't. They've inserted 10 feet. There's some charges there could be some charges of some of the public that this is just what SBPF wants. It's only, you're just doing what they've asked. And I will assure everyone that is not what's happened. This has been collaborative, but it doesn't mean that it has been, sort of that everyone has always been happy and in agreement all the way along. Vince has worked very hard, to make sure to protect the town's interests, and everyone is, sort of fine now, but it wasn't that easy. So anyone that says, gee whiz, this is, just giving SBPF everything they want, doesn't understand the process that has gone on. this is a draft. It's going to be presented. If it's presented, Concom will adjust it and improve it based on, what they see. One of the questions I have either for Vince or for Mr. Dunk is, there's talk of there's no adverse impacts, alongside. How are those determined? That's number one. And then the other one is, and I know this is in there, but failure, how do we determine it's failed? If at some point we have, we determine it isn't working, what is the mechanism that's in there to take care of that? And so those are two. I have one other, but I'll ask those two first. And this is kind of, I've read it, so this is partly for the public, but if you want to.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So there's what was the substance of your first question?
First, there's a lot of like no adverse impacts proven. Other people say, oh yeah, you can see there's already adverse impacts. What's the?
So Dwight can elaborate on this, but when you look at the area that you're in, that you're studying, and the area where the geotubes are, and how there's constant sand being shed off, and we can see that happening and nourishing the beach below it, and then moving left and right. That is one of the ways that we determine that the system is working. And then to try and determine no adverse impacts, we can only look at the kind of immediate areas. And then we have all of these transects going north and south quite a distance. They have retreated at their pretty much, would you say, regular rate, while this area stayed consistent. So once you look at it in those terms, that there's still retreat happening at its regular rate, not an overly excessive accelerated rate. That's about the best way I could put it in layman terms, and I know that Dwight can do a better job in explaining that. Dwight?
Yes, Selectman Fee, when we look at a project like this, a CES, the issue is there loss to the beach because of refraction off of the CES, and is there loss of the beach and the excessive loss of the bluff at either end with refraction off of the CES. And with the placement of the sand template, that ameliorates those effects of reflection and refraction. You are going to get some effects at the ends because of those processes, but with the normal maintenance of recovering the tubes and restoring the ends and rebuilding the sand ramps at the ends, that addresses those issues. The Conservation Commission's agent, Mr. Berman, had also commented that with CESs, the impacts typically are seen at the ends in tens of feet. So when we start looking at effects 1,000 or more feet away, those are, as Vince mentioned, the normal erosion that's occurring along the stretch of, the normal shoreline change along the eastern shore of Nantucket, because we're seeing some areas that have accreted, we're seeing some areas that have eroded or retreated. So, what we're looking for is what are the impacts in front of the template and at the immediate ends, and that's where we're not seeing anything that's can be identified as a cause and effect of the project.
Yeah, and so I guess, if at some point we do, because I think sort of what we're arguing about at times is this going to last 3 years, 5 years, 15, or 50? And I think that we're arguing about something that none of us really know the exact answer to. But if at some point we do see that failure of on the ends or failure of it, what's the mechanism at that point to do something different or to correct it or remove it? Yep. And that's for the public, what's in there.
Yeah, well, I think the Arcadis report, identified the short, medium, and long term, with the long term being the retreat and the relocation of Baxter Road, right? Or new access, and that would probably be the long term, solution. But until the long term solution is needed, the efforts to protect existing Baxter Road, the utilities, and the homes, this gives that more near term protection to the public and private properties there. And because it's, as I think, as you all know, it takes time to implement a long-term retreat. So in order to have that midterm protection, that's what this is. Now, Mr. Fee, I think, you've identified, is the midterm 5 years or 50 years? And none of us have that crystal ball, so we can't tell you that. We can tell you that the geotubes themselves, the fabric, has a design life of like 100 years. So, having a this project can last for a long time, provided, the shoreline is in a state that it continues to, function properly, that this would continue to function and protect the bluff.
Could I add to this just a little bit? Yeah. And I kind of want to address some of Malcolm's concerns. So Malcolm started off by asking, will Mother Nature ultimately win? And in some ways, the answer is always going to be yes, but it's the question of how long is the thing. This is where we talk in resilience planning terms. So resilience is just a cycle. You just try and do what's best to, and most effective for as long as it'll work. It's not about protecting an area in perpetuity. I don't think we can do that in any respect. It's about protecting it for as long as is feasible. And then this gets onto a different thing that was that we were chatting about in my other report about what we learned from Falmouth and adaptation pathways. You do one thing for as long as it'll work, then you find the next solution. That's also partly built into this NOI about how you do what it will work for a certain until a certain failure criteria or a certain trigger is met, and then you bring in the next thing. That is part of what's built here, and it's what we've already been looking at in the Coast Resiliency Advisory Committee in a separate way. So the question is time. You're looking for a solid answer on time. I don't think there is one, and I don't think there can be. So what we did instead was we looked at triggers. So when it goes from lower to mid to upper slope failure, that can be a trigger to bring in the next reasonable measure. Ultimately, you're also right, we're not going to win, but we can increase the longevity of the road, the facilities in the road, and the historic structures in the area until we have to hit the next thing, which, by the way, we're also planning for with the alternative access project. So, we're doing both simultaneously. We're not just putting all our eggs in one basket, we're dividing up our baskets and keeping going. And there was another question Malcolm had about who's monitoring it and who's monitoring the monitors. And I mean this in the nicest possible way. We have independent consultants giving us this and then checking it. And then with just love in my heart, there are other organizations such as the Land Council, the Nantucket Land Council, who then look at these reports and vet them, as well as other independent groups such as the Coastal Conservancy. So we have a lot of eyes on this from every side.
No. Mr. Chair, can I comment on it?
Yeah.
Well, on the second point about monitoring, that's a whole other issue, because we often have a lot of laws and regulations and environmental regulations that don't seem to get always monitored. But let us go back to the concept, well, if Vince agrees, in the end, God will win. What we're doing is we're going into making a large experiment that we're making assumptions about, and assumptions and modeling are only as good as your assumptions, and we don't know if we're correct. So you could make an argument, and it just kind of hit me tonight listening to this. You could make an argument, since we don't know how long this is going to last, and we're just every time we have a new select board or something, we just put it off to the next select board or the next select board after that. At some point in our heart, we know we're going to have to move Baxter Road and those utilities. We should think maybe we should just do it now, because that will work if we want to preserve those houses and those roads. That's an extreme. But that's just kind of something I have to think about. But we don't know if this is going to work, and we don't know how long it's going to last. We have to, in all our discussions, understand that.
Vince?
So I might just not have been clear. I'm sorry, Malcolm. There are two parallel projects running at the exact same time. There's the NOI project for the tow stabilization, I'm the project manager on that on behalf of the town, and that is one standalone project. There's a second project where Libby, as the town manager, Ken Beauregard, the town real estate specialist, and I, the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, on a separate independent track are working on alternative access, effectively moving the road, as you say. So we're planning for it.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that.
Brooke?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing here is that we give ourselves enough time to do that effectively without it costing more to the taxpayers in terms of the acquisition of easements for the alternative access and so forth. So it's a cost benefit analysis. Some of it's, it's unpredictable. You rely on the engineering and the expertise that we've engaged in this, and certainly having more time to plan retreat, to my mind, is better. And to give that retreat project the opportunity to have a solid plan and be in our back pocket and move it forward without getting caught with a breach of the road faster than we can anticipate.
Well, I'm interested in this alternative access plan, and that will be my homework for the week.
Might want to schedule a meeting with Vince, because it's comprehensive and they've done a lot of work. So I mean, I think you can read up on it too, but was it last week's meeting or 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago. That'll be like the quickest.
Yeah, and I do want to compliment you. I mean, it is an incredible amount of work. I'm just being myself by always kind of questioning and challenging. But I compliment your group on the effort you put into it.
Well, thank you. Nothing negative was taken from it. We only learn through questions, and we improve through questions. I'm a scientist at heart as well, don't forget that. I need the criticism to fix it. It's not that it was criticism.
Matt, both your questions, the failure criteria, did we dig into that?
I think you touched on it. Basically, I wanted people to know there's triggers, and
right.
And the triggers are in the document. Some of the triggers are, are purview of Concom, and they will be adjusting them or accepting them. Others that we've talked about are things that we will have to, as a town, that might not be in the purview, but things that we'll be having responsible for. And so I think those are all, if we can partner with the Concom in this, we will be stronger, sort of as a unit going forward than we will be if we continue being, on 2 different sides, 5 different sides, however you look at this. So that my hope is that something good comes out of the discussions and the considerations of this going forward.
Brooke?
My only other concern is that we are adequately funded for failure and removal. We do know that the escrow that was set aside is not enough within a relatively short time period. So just making sure that grows over time with increasing cost of both with expansion of the project and.
That's in the document. So going forward, it will expand. This is for the public. And also they've agreed to cover the removal if that is what happens, and cover it at today's costs. So that is, that hasn't been, what do you call it? Papered up, but that is, we've got, that is agreed upon and will be before we move forward on any of this.
Correct.
So.
That's it. Okay, can we go to Doug Rose? He has his hand up.
Mute. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for inviting comment, and thanks to everybody involved in this conversation. I have spent a fair amount of time on my own trying to understand the ins and outs of this whole issue, and I totally appreciate how unbelievably complex it is. I appreciate everybody's point of view. I especially appreciate Vince's efforts and Matt's questions, as well as Malcolm's. I think the only thing I would ask you to do before making a decision tonight is in the same spirit that you were talking about, the short-term working group, reserving the right to endorse something that you haven't fully absorbed. In this case, I would ask anyone who has not fully read the NOI to hesitate and just ask yourself, how much do you know of what you're signing up for? My take as an independent person, I'm not a scientist, but my take is that what you're effectively signing up for is a future state where there will be no beach. And yes, that could trigger failure and removal, but then consider the political willpower it will take to eliminate geotubes, to remove geotubes in a future where there's literally no distance between the Atlantic Ocean and those geotubes. It will be that much more difficult. So I guess I would just ask everyone to be very thoughtful about this decision tonight. I get it that it's complex. I get it that the town is under lots of financial distress. There's a huge liability issue you've got to consider. I get all that. I guess I step back and say, what ultimately do you want to put your name on when this NOI goes forward and someday perhaps gets approved? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. We go to Spruce.
Thank you, Chairman Bridges. Appreciate the time. I'm also going to ask you guys to think long and hard about this decision. I'm going to frame it in terms of there's no immediate emergency on Baxter Road. There's no imminent threat of collapse. There's no houses falling in. The road is not in danger. And just as a comparison, you can ask Vince about this. The property at, I believe it's 289 Hummock Pond Road. The house is now on cribbing, and that property at 289 is actually gone. It's on, I believe it's on 287 on cribbing. And I was there recently, and the erosion's so bad, I don't even know how they're going to get that. There's no room to take the house out. They'll might have to barge it on the pond. My point is that there's other places that are in an imminent danger, and our houses could fall in the next, matter of fact, we're getting a big windstorm this weekend. So I don't see the imminent danger in Baxter Road. I see it in other parts of the island. I just ask that you think long and hard about this NOI. And obviously I have a lot of trust and faith in this board, and hopefully you'll do the right thing. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Spruce. We go to the next hand up. Dr. Dunk, I'll get back to you. Just want to hear from everybody. Can you please state your name? I see F. Oh, okay.
Yes, you.
Go ahead.
Just on the point of we don't know what the future holds and how long it will last. I just want to emphasize, it's been said before, but that the existing GEO2 project has been in place now since 2013, so like 9 years ballpark, and has weathered countless storms, some quite major storms. And then there has been zero erosion behind it. The road and some homes have been perfectly protected. There's no reason to believe that anytime in the near future, let's say a couple of decades sort of thing, I personally think it's longer than that, that storm conditions will change in such a way as to make this not workable. That's one, I think, extremely key point. So the idea that maybe we put this in and then, within a year or two or whatever, some short period of time, it will have to be taken out. I think the data and history, which was originally put in as a pilot project, indicate that is not the case. Second, it has so far been totally privately funded. Taxpayers of Nantucket have not put a dime in it other than the monitoring process, which makes a lot of sense. It certainly should be closely monitored. And the plan is that that would essentially be the case in the future. There are some stretches that don't have any homes that may require some funding that is not directly from the homeowners there. But essentially it is very largely, nearly entirely paid for by private money, not town money. The opposite, I guess a third sort of related point is the idea that danger isn't imminent. If these geotubes are removed now, and known, of course, no, it's not extended, I think most experts, we might ask Dwight to chime in, there is a very real risk that Baxter Road would be lost within a couple of years. There's a very real risk because the area behind the geotubes has been protected from erosion, whereas the areas on either side of the geotubes have not. There's a very real risk of major bank collapse simply because it's protruding without protection almost immediately, within a year. And then aided by a storm or something, the road would likely become unusable imminently within a year or two. So removal of the existing project is itself a challenge, but there's no question that the danger to Baxter Road and its utilities is that danger is imminent. And the tab for Nantucket's taxpayers will be order of magnitude $20–30 million. So the town has a very substantial financial stake, not just the one I just mentioned, but also the longer term tax paying of a preserved Baxter Road community, which has been a major source of revenues for the town. That's it.
Thank you. Could you state your name for the record, Helmut?
I'm sorry?
Could you state your name for the record?
Oh, Helmut Weimar.
Thank you. Most of us knew that here, but we just tried to ask for the record. Thank you, Helmut. Could you go on to the next?
Jason, it's Deanne.
Go ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the Coastal Conservancy. We have many questions about the content of the draft notice of intent that you and SBPF intend to submit to the Conservation Commission. However, what we'd like to do tonight is to just raise some procedural issues at this point in the process. But before I ask the questions, I do want to say, to put it simply, there's another side of the story. And you have just heard, I haven't been watching the time, maybe a 45-minute presentation by a consultant hired by SBPF. And I respectfully request, in order for you to be more informed and for the community to be informed, and in total fairness, that the experts on behalf of the Land Council and the Greenhill family have the same opportunity to make a public presentation as SBPF has tonight. In terms of our procedural questions, and we did share them with you in writing, they're very brief and all they require is a yes or no answer, but we think they're important before moving forward. 1, does the select board have the signature of all of the property owners in the proposed project area from 41 Baxter to 119 Baxter?
No.
Does the select board have all of the easements from the property owners necessary for the relocation of Baxter Road?
No.
Has SBPF provided the performance bond as described in the MOU and referred to in the draft NOI.
I'll have Vince talk about that one. Matt, you had your hand up real quick.
Yeah, no, but back, yeah, you can come to answer this one, come and answer this, but I'll, back to number 2, they have all the easements for backstory relocation. They're underway and it's a process. And if it's cooperative, we will have the easements and we'll have the agreement and we'll be moving forward. If it isn't cooperative, we'll be battling it out, lot by lot, as needed. And so this is, sort of, and so anyway, that's number 2, Deanne. And then I could answer number 3, but Vince, you'll answer number 3.
If it's okay. Sorry for interrupting everyone. It's Deanne asked a very direct question and got a very direct answer. The select board doesn't have these things like the permissions from the property owners and all the signatures. SBPF has all of them, but this is kind of, I don't mean to cause problem, a tiny bit of a gray area. This is a public notice of intent that hasn't been submitted to the commission yet, so there's a question of privacy for the property owners to put it in front of the select board, but we have all the assurances in place as I understand it. Meredith Mullenhauser from SBPF is on and she can speak to that in detail if needed, but it's all in process. And I believe Deanne was getting onto the third question about the performance bond. The select board does not have that yet either, but it is again in process and has become something that must be in place before the NOI gets submitted. And we've discussed that at length and SBPF has committed to that. And Meredith can also speak to that. So
thanks, Vince.
They're very direct questions, but to give color.
Go ahead, Meredith.
Thanks so much, Vince. Meredith Moldenhauer on behalf of SBPF. And yes, obviously, we have gathered the letters and signatures from all the property owners and have those prepared for submittal. If the select board agrees to move forward on the application, their signature also would be required. And in regards to the surety bond, as Vince already indicated, we are committed to working with the town and having that resolved before this would be filed. We are looking to try to get this filed by the Concom's deadline of the 17th next week. And Vince can also talk about the importance of that deadline based on the current removal order that is pending for the order of conditions that I believe the select board discussed at last week's meeting in regards to the letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
Yep, go ahead.
I haven't finished my questions.
Yes, I was taking them one by one.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Have all of the property owners with oceanfront property agreed to and supplied One Big Beach easements?
That is something that we're also looking into in more detail, and I can answer that at a further select board meeting.
Thank you, Vince.
Yeah, my understanding, Deanne, on that is the ones directly protected by the geotubes have previously, and that as we extend, the others will. But I don't have them in my pocket. I can't attest to that, but that's my understanding of where it stands right now.
Thank you, Matt. But just so we understand,
right.
The proposal in the NOI is for a coastal engineering structure that's almost 3/4 of a mile long. It is for a blanket approval. So we need to get Big Beach easements from all of the oceanfront property owners before this is submitted, or we will lose all leverage to get the One Big Beach easements. My next question is, have the property owners signed waivers of liability to protect the town?
Because of the position, the likely position of the geotubes, that won't be so much of an issue because it'll be partly on town property and partly on private property. So they're taking the risk as well as we are. But the way that these are structured to go in the ground and their removability, this has always been a question at Concom. How easily can you remove them? Pretty easily, but you just need to do it, plan it properly and appropriately. And that can take a little bit of time, as we're now discovering in front of the commission. So that kind of, in terms of liability, that means that we're in it together, but we need to, I don't think there was ever a question as we were developing this about including these liability waivers. As such, we were more interested in making sure that it would perform extremely admirably.
Thank you. Matt, you had it?
Yeah, the other point on that, Dan, is the town is looking at sort of, I don't know if you'd call it a liability, but a hold harmless. Part of the agreement moving forward is that, you know, the town will be cooperative and work on this, but when the time comes to do something different, we will not be, we will have in place agreements from the property owners to not have to do takings. We'll have agreed upon, you know, sort of, you know, we'll have the road figured out, the road can go in, and we'll have agreed upon all that prior. And that's, you know, that will take a couple years to do. This is a lot by lot, and this is going to take some time, but that has been already discussed, and Vince can talk a little more at length about that, and that's a really important aspect of this.
Matt covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
Honestly, Matt covered it lovely. Go ahead,
Well,
Deanna.
yes, thank you, Jason. So the answer to most of my questions is no.
Well, it's complicated. It's
in process. You said that we wouldn't have leverage. I think we do have leverage because we can back out of this at any time. And so, you know, that if they aren't doing something right, we can back out of this. Now, I think my own opinion, if we're going to be getting these, if we get 80% of the hold harmless agreements for the town, and the town protects the road for 5 years, 10 years, and doesn't have to pay for it, and gets the, you know, hold harmlesses in place, and gets the alternative roads sorted out, then we're way ahead of the game, you know, so in my mind, you know, so I understand some have a different opinion on this. Anyway.
And I have my last question, please, Jason.
Yes, go ahead.
Since this project from 41 Baxter to 119 Baxter encompasses so many more properties than the current 9 feet of geotubes, which, by the way, was a temporary project. It was never a pilot project. And since the property owners within the proposed project area will benefit financially in terms of protection for their real estate, may we assume that the members of the select board and the town team working on this project have made proper disclosure of any possible conflicts of interest?
To my knowledge, everyone has made any disclosure of any conflict of interest potential, to my knowledge. I think we're pretty careful about that in this issue. Libby?
I was just going to say that to the best of our knowledge, I don't think anybody has one.
And that's almost a, hey, Matt, when did you stop beating your wife question? You know, it's sort of you're asking, you're saying, sort of saying I did something wrong, that, you know, and impugning my integrity, but just by asking the question the way you did, Dan. And I know you don't mean that, you know, but it feels like that. So no, you know, no, I did not. I don't have a conflict of interest on it.
You know, Matt, I appreciate that, but I think one thing we all agree on is good government with high ethical standards. And the way this question was posed was not in a negative way, was not an accusatory way. We just want to be assured that that indeed has happened. And if there are any conflicts, they have been properly disclosed. And you have all said yes, and for that we thank you.
Thank you, Deanne.
Thank you, Jason.
We go to Steve Cohen.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for recognizing me. I just wanted to thank the board for all the time and effort that the town has put into this. I think it's really come an incredible way, starting with a project that was not as beneficial to the community as the one that was proposed to you. I think it's much, much better. But what I do want to do is just take a minute for the public to somewhat respond through you, Mr. Chairman, to the questions that were proposed by Ms. Atherton, which frankly, 10 years into this, I'm surprised that she's asking them in the way that she is, insinuating, I think, that the town is not being responsible and is answering no to all of her questions, when I think that she knows that there's a multi-step process here, and the first step is the notice of intent and permit from the Conservation Commission. But the second step is a license from the town, and nothing can go forward without the license from the town. And the town can demand, and should, and has demanded all of these things that she's asked for and more, which are at that second stage. So to ask why you don't have them at the first stage when they're all clearly laid out as stage 2 things, and the town has all the leverage it needs to ask for those things and more, and already has, I think paints the town in a light that's inappropriate. With all the hard work that's been done and with all the preparation that's been done, all of the things that Ms. Atherton asked about and more are in the works and are appropriately in the process. So I just want the public to know that the town is acting responsibly here and has addressed all of those things, and that they are will be delivered appropriately, and that there's no horse out of the gate if they're not in hand today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Go to the next one.
Thank you, Jason. I guess I was the next one.
Yes, this is Rick Atherton.
Yeah, my name is Rick Atherton. Because I've been through this during the first few years of this project, I understand what Mr. Cohen is saying, but the experience, quite frankly, is that each time you put these off, it becomes much more difficult for them to actually be achieved. In that regard, I think the further question, apparently it is agreed between the parties that the answer to these questions will all be yes. And your policy in approaching this project is that's the case. And I think what Mr. Cohen is saying, if they're not agreed to in a fashion that is really makes the point of each of these questions clear to the citizens of Nantucket, then you won't proceed. And the reason I mention that is I haven't heard you say that before. And Jason, I think if you say that, it would make a difference, and we would all understand your policy on each of these questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Dwight, did you have any? You raised your hand there for a second a while back. Did you want to comment, or you okay?
Yes, I just, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of points, not necessarily in the order they were mentioned, but there was a comment about whether or not there was imminent threat. The DPW established what the imminent threat criteria was along Baxter Road with the Sconset Bluff of setbacks, that the paved road used to be 25 feet from the top of the bank, and that where there could be up to where the storm of 2012, 2013 yielded a 40-foot loss in one storm, they established a 65-foot setback for the road from the top of bluff as being imminent threat criteria. There are areas along the top of bluff where Baxter Road presently is less than 65 feet from the top of the coastal bank. So therefore, the imminent threat criteria established by the DPW is met in certain locations. And the imminent threat for homes are homes within 40 feet, and there are homes within 40 feet of the top of the bluff. So imminent threat criteria as established previously for Sconset Bluff by the DPW has been met. There's a question about whether or not the geotubes work. The project that's in place demonstrates that the geotubes work. There has been no landward retreat of the top of the coastal bank where the geotube system is installed. We have seen it continue to retreat landward elsewhere where it's unprotected. So, that is a proof of concept here. And the notice of intent for the current project did identify that the 950 feet project could be, well, it was initially about 852. There was extensions added a few years later that brought it up to 947 feet. But that approximately 950 foot section after that was installed, that the applicants could apply for the full-length project, because remember, this evolved out of the revetment project that was about 4,000 feet long, after 3 years had lapsed. And that's what was done back in 2018. The 3 years had lapsed from the initial installation for the extension. So although it was identified for 3 years, there was the ability to extend it in the future. Lastly, as we mentioned in the presentation, as Vince mentioned early up front, is the request here is as the co-applicant and co-owner to sign the notice of intent. The notice of intent is a very focused application for a very focused permit, an order of conditions pursuant to the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw. The purposes of those are protect the interests of the act and the values of the bylaw, and the project meets those standards. So Ms. Atherton brought up a lot of legal issues, and I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to speak about all those issues, but when it comes to the focus of the notice of intent and the focus of the order of conditions, the question is, does the project protect the interests of the act and the value of bylaw? And that's established by the Conservation Commission, but that cannot go forward without the owner's signatures. So the request here is, as I mentioned, it's not to approve or disapprove of the project, it's to allow the project application to be submitted for review, vetting, conditioning if a permit is to be issued by the appropriate board, which is the Conservation Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince?
There's one thing Dwight said that is extremely pertinent, but needs just a little addition to it. Dwight talked about how under 60 feet puts the road in an at-risk area. One more, and most of the northern section, north of the geotubes, have some monitoring points. One of the smaller ones is 58 feet, and one of the even smaller ones again, I measured yesterday with the Coastal Resources technician, 36 feet. One of the things Dwight could have also said, but that I can add now at this point, one of the triggers for closing the road is 25 feet. We're 11 feet shy of closing the road. And that is for a number of homes, that's for the lighthouse, that's quite a short distance. But just move south just a fraction to the geotubes themselves. What triggered a lot of that was because the road became within 35 feet. And it remains at that ever since the geotubes were put there, or at least since we started monitoring it under the DPW criteria in 2018, has remained at 35 feet. It has worked and has preserved the road, and that's all fine. But at the end and moving north, we're getting back into these same criteria again. And that is the display of imminent risk. And this is one of the reasons why Reach 1 has to go first, and it's one of the reasons that, and one of the big things that was a talking point in the development of the NOI, and that eventually we got the point across, and in a very civic-minded way, SBPF said, okay, we see this now, and decided, yes, we're going to make this Reach go first because it is the priority, despite the fact that all the main homeowners are to the south. So if they're not, they have made a big turn, and we have brought this about. And they see the need, and the town has displayed the need. We've shown it off. We've made a song and dance about it, and we're in the imminent risk of getting within 1 or 2 storms of closing the road. It could be more than 2 storms, but who knows? But the risk is extraordinarily close.
And the 25-foot was determined by an engineer back when this did. It didn't say at 25. It doesn't say we have to close it. We need to bring the engineers back in to examine it, to then make a further determination. But 25 is really, it is, it's kind of, you're near the end. You might get a little bit more out of it, but not much. So I think it's,
Thank you, Matt. Meredith? Thought she have her hand up? Or is she frozen? Sorry, Meredith, you are frozen. And you have your hand up. We'll come back to you. if you come back on. Any thoughts from select board members? Don?
I mean, I'm ready to move this forward and see how the review at Concom goes. There's been a lot of effort put into some compromises here and fixing some real concerns that we've had about the performance bond and the easements and so forth.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. I'm ready to move it forward as well. The one suggestion was to have others come and speak. They're welcome, in my mind, they're welcome to come anytime and speak under other comments or talk to Jason and Don and have it scheduled. I mean, I think, but I know all of that is gonna play out again at the Concom. So, it's the only reason I'm sort of saying, well, they're welcome to come here is, give us a taste of it too, because I sit and watch the Concom and I feel for them.
Spread it out.
Yeah, spread out I feel for them, but at the same time, it's, I'm ready to move this forward and hope that we're getting there.
Is there a motion?
I move as mentioned.
Second.
So moved.
Any last comments? To approve the NOI.
If I may offer it, pending the completion of the performance bond.
Yep. You accept that?
I accept that amendment.
Okay. Who seconded that?
Me.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 That passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
And the simple answer to all those other items is all those other items are going to be done. The intent is to have hold harmless agreements and to have this clear. There's a lot of, that's all, where there's no intent to ignore that.
Thank you. So Meredith, you froze on us there. Sorry. And we got to the motion before you came back. Sorry about that.
I'm very happy. Thank you all for your time. I was just going to indicate we had over 20 supporters here that I'm sure are all very happy with this vote. And we look forward to moving forward.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. And thank you for all the comments from the public. It was a good discussion. Thank you, Vince. Okay, select board reports and comments. We're review and adoption of proposed transportation and parking advisory committee structure and mission. This is continued from November 2nd. Libby, yeah.
So at your last meeting, there was some discussion about adding in some additional duties to the proposed parking advisory committee and perhaps changing the name to something like transportation and parking advisory committee. So it was sort of agreed that we would modify the structure and the membership and bring it back. And after some additional internal discussion, concerns were expressed as to overloading the committee with a little bit too much. And one of the things we were discussing was adding possibly, and it would have been subject to the planning commission's approval, folding the bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee into the transportation and parking advisory committee. And that is now viewed as just a bit too much. So we would want to withdraw that bit and proceed with what's outlined. I think, can you put that up, please? We refined it a little bit. And it should be in your packet. It might be a bit, I might have done this not till Monday. It is. Oh, okay. So it's just basically to take BPAC out and add in the traffic safety work group responsibilities, which are largely traffic related. Sometimes there's parking spot eliminations and things like that, and that would all get folded into this group. I do want to emphasize, though, that the group really can't get, even if you agree to this and we start advertising, we get applicants and all, the group isn't really going to get going until we have a parking coordinator position filled. It's currently vacant. It's a new position. and we are having trouble filling it. But we don't have the staff resources to handle the duties as outlined without it.
Libby, is traffic safety getting pulled into this?
The idea is that traffic safety would get pulled into this, and at this point, traffic safety primarily has staff on it. There is a citizen on there who's acted as the sort of de facto engineer, and he and I had a bit of back and forth about this, and I think his feeling is that it's a bit, I don't want to speak for him, but I think it's a bit too much. He felt it was a bit too much to add to the group, and he most likely would not continue participating, but not in like a negative way.
In traffic safety, you had sometimes either the police chief, fire chief, or representatives.
Designees from public safety,
DPW.
public works. Yeah.
Will that be a part of this group as admin, or?
Those people would be brought in as needed.
Yeah.
To provide input on
Okay.
requests for
Okay.
whatever they
Instead of them
provide
having
input
to go
now.
to every single meeting, they would go to ones if there was something that
Correct.
they needed to be there.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems more efficient.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is all up to you all. The membership is certainly at your discretion, but we were trying to get it sort of wide for the parking part of things.
Yeah, what's the thought on integrating this with NPEDC or planning, et cetera? There's no rep from anywhere around there. So how would it be integrated? Because the last thing you want is one group doing something and then going there and saying, oh, that's not good planning, that's not what we want. How do we make sure they're integrated?
I think there would be a staff liaison in the form of the transportation program manager, and he most likely would attend both.
Gotcha, so there'd be a connection
Yep.
through him, okay.
So my only question is procedurally, if we establish this, we just go through the process of appointing, but we don't want to disband traffic safety in the meantime. So how do we do it procedurally?
They'll just continue on until this group is in place.
Okay, so once the parking coordinator is hired.
Yep.
We go to Mary Longacre.
Thank you, Jason. I'm speaking at the moment as chair of NPEDC. I did request that this general topic be put on our agenda for November 21st. So we would expect to be discussing the potential combination and impacts of the new position and the new committee. I appreciate that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which is a committee formed by NP and EDC, not directly by town administration, is now not part of the mix here. So that does put us at a little bit of a remove. But I just ask that you would keep NP and EDC informed, either through the transportation planner, who is one of our employees, or generally directly to Andrew Vorse and to me as the chair of the committee, just so that we can stay abreast of what is going on. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Do we need to accept this, adopt it as is?
Well, I mean, it's a suggestion to you all. So if you think it's a good idea, I would say, yes, we would need you to adopt it, and we would begin to develop the necessary advertising and following the committee appointment process.
Okay. Do we need to wait for NPDC to kind of weigh in, maybe some suggestions, or?
That would be up to you all. I don't honestly see really what it has to do with them, specifically since BPAC is out of it now, and we could always refer certain proposals to them. It's basically traffic and parking.
Right. It's not big. It's not bigger policy.
The paid parking is under your jurisdiction.
Okay.
I don't think it hurts us to wait, because if we want to be, I don't think it hurts us to wait, because we're not going to form it right away anyway.
That's true.
Let them meet on it,
Yeah.
come back with what their comments. Because if we're, if we're not on the same page, we want to be on, on the same page on this. So let's take their input, because there is a lot that is done there or should be done there that impacts this. And so I think that's,
Do you want to bring this back to another agenda item once NPDC weighs in, or do you want, like, Matt, you and I to sit on it and okay it? So sometimes we do that just so we don't have to bring it back here.
I don't think it has to come back if they don't have anything. I'm happy with it if they don't have anything to improve it. But if they have, if they have comments to improve it, or if they feel slighted and want X or Y or Z, then I think we could come back and adjust it. Otherwise, I would approve it as is myself.
Okay. Well, Mary, I'll reach out to you. We need to have a coffee anyway.
So I would move approval of the proposed outline, subject to amendments proposed by NPDC at a later date.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passed unanimously. Any comments or committee reports? Brooke, usually quick to jump in on committee reports. You're on a lot of committees. You good tonight?
I suppose I could tell you there's a lot of trash talk happening still. I say it every week.
Anybody else? Well, Dawn's getting ready to make a motion to adjourn. Right?
No, I was just
okay.
I was just going to say
So
before I
fast.
make the motion to adjourn that we've kind of reconvened discussions in regard to the next steps in the Island Home and Senior Center, and doing a tour with some of the group members and so forth. So that's just, it's going in a good direction.
Right. I've been trying to, sometimes I forget of what's coming up next week. So we're gonna have a discussion on the form of government. We'll have 3 town managers or previous town managers who did this presentation that Brooke and Libby watched. It was really good. They've all been a part of, they were either in our form of government right now, and then they went to town council forum or different variations. So we're gonna hear from them.
Good.
Kind of scaled down version, and then we can have not going to decide anything, just a conversation. As I said earlier at the beginning of the meeting, short-term rental discussion along with other warrant articles. HDNC, I think that might be on there for reinstating the advisory boards, and that's everything. A couple of little things. Those are the main ones. Dawn or Brooke?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Anything to sign tonight, Erica?
Wow. See, it was like having an umbrella. Dawn had a pen, so there's nothing to sign.